there is something about being on camera and knowing that YouTube likes to keep things a little bit PG more than when you're listening to an audio podcast that has made me reconsider re-recording this lovely episode. So today we get to talk about working things out the functional adult emotional grown-up way. And see, it was very grown-up and very emotional, but again, not necessarily the best format for video, because there is, again, something about video. I also felt like, it's one thing if we're face-to-face for real. It's another thing if it's online. It gets misunderstood. So this is what brings out the best in you. Thinking things through. Now, this is a beautiful part of that enlightenment soul age group journey, of a secure attachment journey. A person who's moving into being a functional adult emotionally, it begins from day one that we can have made certain types of choices, of course, and with the stories. So one of the stories that I'll never forget was the ugly duckling, the one where, you get taught if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And then I moved into my lovely teenage years, and I saw a lot of what I considered immature behavior that I then grew up to see in the same form, and that I then got to learn from the lovely trauma experts that I'm learning from, and the somatic experts, and the somatic experiencing experts, about this thing called the adaptive child emotional response, which would be unforgiving, harsh, seeing things in a black and white way, as well as the empirical data that shows how overgeneralized statements keeps people and just keeps anyone stuck in. It can be a trauma response from different areas and reasons. One of the ones that they mention is PTSD, but here's where trauma is brought about by abuse and or neglect as well. So many households have what others will deem, a great household, and instead it's not great for the nervous system. So it's not because parents are doing it on purpose. There's a lack of knowledge that we held prior to technology allowing us to see within the human body. And by the way, the polyvagal theory, which is very important to all of this stuff, is still in the works of allowing the empirical data to build the way that our quantitative scientists need in order to prove things to each other. So, it is what it is. Now, the part that gets me a little bit more is not the academics and how it works. I have a master's in international relations and diplomacy, and I still remember learning how to conduct a research paper, as well as doing statistics so that I may know about the mean and the average and blah, 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 blah. And, it's interesting how subjective it is when it comes to the idea that qualitative or quantitative, one is better than the other, because within a research field, academically speaking, there are different opinions about that. But depending on what type of teacher you get, there you go. You got to go with what they will prefer, or you can get penalized for it. That would be implicit bias, which is very funny to me to have met it in my bachelor's years as well. So here you go. People who are educators don't even recognize that they implicitly will conduct a grading process based on their own preference. But I, as a person who has an objective look at me and others, was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know where this came from. And in fact, I actually defended one of my grades. And by basically outlining, you told us to do X, Y, Z, D, E, F, G. Here's where I did X, Y, Z, D, E, F, G. Your grade doesn't make sense. And my grade did get changed. Now, had I made an accusation, not only would that have been unproven, but it also would not have had me be listened to. So again, empirical data, we get it. It works a certain way. But in the meantime, those of us who are actually compassionate, because, here's the other part. What I added to today's title is working things out the functional adult emotional grown-up way is what brings out the best in you and helps to heal trauma. So some of us learn the right silence. It's not because we don't see behind what it is because what we see is really a nervous system of a person that's in a sympathetic or dorsal vagal. And we intuitively, I was a teenager, I just called it a good gut feeling. Intuitively, we know things. And intuitively, our heart as a human being also knows one thing, that if what you did wasn't nice and it didn't make me feel very happy about it, emotionally speaking, I think I would not want to do the same thing to you. So the aspect of actually consciously choosing is very straightforward. Now, here's the part about where people who have a rigid and therefore not an integrated brain, which is where the people who are not in secure attachment stand, if they have a rigid mind that moves into a unforgiving and harsh place because of unresolved trauma, which isn't their conscious choice, and it isn't their infant choice, and it wasn't their parents' choice either, and so on and so forth. So when we actually look at what is evolutionary science, I believe that's a term that I can use, but there's a whole field of evolutionary science that accompanies the neuroscience, the updated trauma-informed experts. There's what is called the fact that our posture of shame comes because of a number of findings of how, when we'd be kicked out of that tribe, man, we'd be fending for our life from lions, bears, tigers, And, people think this is bullshit. And I'm like, okay, because I don't have an official license and I'm not doing my education so that I may become a therapist. I'm doing it because I'm a mentor, consultant, podcast host, many different online entrepreneurship words that people love to use. And then they don't commit to. So, I'm getting educated so that I can actually help people to move into their inner well-being. It's not to flaunt it around like, a little badge of honor or something like that. So, what I was trying to get at is that if people actually learned everything about being a human with curiosity, not with fear, which is instead what people do. So they're looking at this information to label each other and to define each other, which, by the way, you should just, go get tested. If you have wondering, this is one of those things. I saw this one person, and this is an expert, and I'm thinking, dude, they made a statement that I completely thought was inappropriate because of their academic background. You'd think that they would make a specific type of suggestion. So if I ever wondered if any of my loved ones had any type of behavioral situation that creates such a distressful situation, I would not accuse them by naming them. So I wouldn't name call, which is where I see a bunch of people loving to use name calling. No, I would actually sit them down and say, maybe we should go together to check out if there are things that are actually, they can actually diagnose it for real. And, oh, by the way, they are looking to update that as well. In time, we need to wait for the empirical data on the polyvagal theory and other aspects that our lovely mental health community, thank goodness they're there, keep on doing research. So I am very honored to know that academia exists, by the way. This is the other part where I see people dissing college, and I'm thinking, oh, I thought we were past the whole let's stay illiterate. And I thought we were advancing in a good way, but the divide, this is where people are looking to their groups. I want only my education from the group that speaks about things the way that I feel or I think is right. And then we look to our past again and segment and, the segmentation. That's the separation consciousness. If we're going to be in our best behavior, I'd say it starts with actually, how do you treat your neighbor? And do you ever wonder that if they are actually in a bad mood, do you know that that is not because they're just choosing to be in a bad mood? So when people choose splinters, and therefore they create ruptures within their loved ones, their connections, the whole cancel culture that is out there, not only do people use the word toxic in ways that, again, it's like name calling, they're not actually supporting each other to heal. They don't see the compassion. So some of us do. This is the 5DC, those who want to become, at the very least, their secure attachment version, if they choose to move into that enlightenment soul age group. There's other things that we look into. That's why I get very passionate on the episodes. So yeah, it's a bit of explicit content if you tune in. Just FYI, like I said, video doesn't feel very right to share it. And there is something about faces. But if we were face-to-face, that might look a little bit different. It depends on how you feel about curse words. I know some people, they grew up, but they still feel like, yucky. So long story short, when we learn to actually work things out with emotions that involve love and compassion and patience and understanding and being able to have fun together, is a whole different story. And we do help people to heal from trauma instead of blocking them or canceling them or, name calling them and other things that don't result in anything. So I look forward to hearing your questions or thoughts. Any episodes you'd like to hear about, let me know, and have a great day.